She smiled at me from across the marble kitchen island, that soft, rehearsed smile people wear when they think they still have control. Her diamond bracelet caught the candlelight just so. And for a moment, if you didn't know better, you might have believed Clara Kingston was just another woman admiring a tasteful place setting. But what Clara didn't know was that every fork, every floral arrangement, every velvet name card on that table had been chosen with surgical precision, not for aesthetics, but for consequence. And in exactly 42 minutes, the man she thought she had won would be publicly revealed for the liar he truly was. And her smile? That carefully practiced calm. It would collapse into something I'd been waiting months to see. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you rewatching from. And if you have ever had to pretend you didn't know something just to make the reveal that much sweeter, tap that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story might just be your new favorite revenge. This isn't just about a cheating husband or a best friend's betrayal. It's about what happens when the mask slips and the entire room is watching. My name is Amelia Quinn, and this is the night I stopped being the perfect wife and became something far more dangerous. But to understand how I got there, how two marriages shattered beneath a single chandelier, we need to go back. Not to the betrayal itself, but to the silence before it. The dinners, the doubt, the curated perfection. Because this isn't just a revenge story, it's a reckoning. Every morning, I woke up in a mansion tucked inside Eden Hill, the kind of neighborhood where people smile with their teeth, not their eyes. Our bedroom was bathed in gentle gold light, filtered through imported silk curtains. The bed was always made, the coffee brewed by the housekeeper before I even slipped on my robe. On paper, I had the dream life, a successful career as a director of financial risk analysis, a gorgeous home, and a husband whose name carried weight in every elite circle, Dr. Nathaniel Quinn, the cosmetic surgeon to the stars. On Instagram, it all looked perfect. Brunch photos with my girlfriends, charity galas in glittering gowns, anniversary dinners with candlelight and Chateau Margaux. But when the filters came off, so did the illusion. I spent most nights alone, swirling cold wine in crystal glasses, pretending Nathaniel was just held up at the clinic. He used to text me updates. Lately, he didn't even bother. There was no obvious cruelty in our marriage. No shouting, no bruises, no public fights. Just silence, polished distance. We sat across from each other at dinners with practiced smiles. He would compliment my dress. I'd compliment his tie, and we'd both pretend not to notice the growing void between us. The strange thing was, everyone envied me. "You were so lucky, Amelia," they'd say. "He adores you." But they only saw the carefully curated highlight reel. They didn't see me staring at the clock at midnight, still in makeup, wondering if he would come home at all. They didn't hear the deafening silence in the car rides, the way his eyes never met mine unless someone else was watching. I started studying our photos. At every event, Nathaniel faced the camera with a smile that belonged to his publicist. And me, I was always turned slightly toward him, my body unconsciously reaching for connection. But he never looked back. He never noticed. I clung to structure. Yoga at 6, emails at 7:30, risk meetings at 9. It kept me from thinking too hard, from feeling too much. I told myself I was just tired, just stressed, just imagining things. But one night, I sat on our pristine marble kitchen floor, in silence, eating cold leftovers in a silk dress from an event I left early. And I realized no one had touched me in weeks. Not lovingly, not even accidentally. I could still hear my own voice, smiling into a mirror, whispering, "You re happy. You are. You have everything." But deep down, a tiny crack had formed in the mask I'd worn for so long. And for the first time in years, I didn't believe myself. At first, it was easy to explain away. Nathaniel started staying later at the clinic. "New clients," he said. "A big name from LaFleur in last minute." I nodded, told him I understood, kissed his cheek as he walked out the door. But the kisses felt hollow. His skin didn't smell like aftershave anymore. It smelled like cologne I didn't recognize. Then came the mirror obsession. He bought a ring light for his bathroom vanity, the kind influencers use, and started spending 45 minutes in front of it. He examined every angle of his face, like it was a patient he didn't quite trust. New serums, different protein powders, hair vitamins. He always cared about appearances, we both did. Living in Eden Hill practically required it, but this was different. He was chasing something, refining himself for someone, and I could feel it like a pulse beneath the surface. I found out about the phone last. One Sunday morning, I reached for his phone on the kitchen counter. We were out of oat milk, and I was going to text the housekeeper. But the screen wouldn't open. The passcode had changed. I stared at the phone in my hand longer than I should be. A simple 6-digit lock, but suddenly it felt like a wall between us. When I asked him about it, he laughed. There was a weird pop-up last week. I just changed it for security. He said it so casually, so smoothly. I almost believed him. Almost. That night, I sat awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly beside me. My brain spun like a roulette wheel. He's tired. I've been distant. Maybe I've made him feel unloved. Maybe I stopped trying. I blamed myself. Not out loud, but in the way I moved softer, gentler, more careful. I started wearing perfume to bed again. Started cooking his favorite dishes on Thursdays like I used to before work consumed us. I leaned in during our rare conversations, nodded more, asked about his day even when I didn't want to hear the answer. And still, something inside me ached. A whisper I kept shoving down. "You not crazy. You feel what you feel." But then I'd hear my own voice argue back. "You just being paranoid. Don't ruin this. Don't be dramatic." It wasn't him gaslighting me, not yet. It was me. I was the one twisting myself into knots, rewriting my instincts, diluting my intuition until it was barely a hum. I told no one, because who would I tell? My friends were wives of other surgeons, other CEOs, other perfect husbands. Our conversations were about designer baby showers and curated wine cellars. None of them would understand what it felt like to be slowly erased by the person sleeping beside you. One night, I watched him from the hallway as he adjusted his jawline in the mirror, tilting his face left and right, expressionless. His reflection looked more familiar to him than I did. And that was the moment it hit me. He wasn't obsessed with how he looked, he was obsessed with how someone else saw him. But I still couldn't say it out loud, because to speak, it would make it real. So I kept smiling, kept organizing charity menus, kept walking through our house like it wasn't quietly collapsing room by room. And inside, something began to break. It happened on a Thursday. He was running late for a dinner with colleagues, or so he said, and left his blazer draped over the back of our breakfast nook chair. I wasn't snooping. I was tidying, the way I always did, smoothing away wrinkles in our perfect life. I reached for his jacket, meaning to hang it in the foyer closet. That S when I felt something stiff in the breast pocket, not a receipt, not a folded napkin, paper thick, smooth, and slightly perfumed. A note. I stared at it in my hand, not breathing. The handwriting was delicate, cursive, and deliberate, the kind of script women used when they wanted their words to be remembered. It wasn't long, just 5 lines. But it split my reality down the middle. You make me feel like my real self again. I cannot wait until we don't have to hide Paris in the spring. Just like we dreamed. Tell her soon, you promised. Clara. My first thought wasn't rage. It was stillness. A strange bone, deep quiet settled over me, like the moment right before a glass shatters. I sat down on the edge of the marble counter and stared at the note, like it might disappear if I blinked too fast. Clara. Not a name I knew. Not someone from our circle. That made it worse. It wasn't some careless fling. Some lapse in judgment at a medical conference. It was secretive, intentional, ongoing, future-oriented. Spring in Paris. He was planning a future, just not with me. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call him. I placed the note back exactly where I found it, smoothed the lapel, hung the jacket in the closet. Every movement felt rehearsed, robotic, like I was watching myself play a part in a film where I already knew the ending. Later that evening, we had dinner at home. He complimented the roast chicken, told me he might have to fly out next month for a technique summit in Geneva. I smiled, poured him wine, said, "Of course." My voice didn't tremble, my hands didn't shake, but inside, I had fractured. That night, in bed beside him, his breath steady in sleep, I stared at the ceiling and thought, am I a person in this marriage or a curated piece of furniture? A set piece, a backdrop, a polished woman with a good surname who looked lovely in holiday cards and poured the wine just right. I wondered when I had stopped being his Amelia and become the Amelia Quinn, the perfect complement to his image, but not to his life. He had written her promises, plans. While I was busy orchestrating charity events and decoding silence, he was building something elsewhere, something warmer, more alive. And yet, I said nothing, because I needed to be sure, not just of him, but of myself. Of how much I'd allowed, how long I'd silenced my own voice, how far I'd drifted from the woman who once demanded more from the world. So I waited, I watched. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally waking up. I didn't fall apart. There was no screaming in the kitchen, no sobbing on marble floors, no cinematic collapse. Something colder took over, something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity, the kind that got me through 20 horror audits and billion, duller assessments, the kind that didn't flinch. That version of me, the one I left behind when I married Nathaniel, stepped forward again like a soldier reporting for duty, and she was lethal. I started with the timeline. The dates he claimed to be working late, the sudden trips, the new gym sessions and vitamin deliveries. I opened my laptop and built a spreadsheet like I was preparing a risk model, and in a way, I was. I labeled it Clara Analysis Confidential. Every purchase, every unusual charge on our shared accounts, I logged it. 2 overnight courier fees to a boutique in Charleston. A double booking at the Rookery Inn. A jewelry receipt he claimed was a gift for a colleague's wife. I knew better now. Then I moved to passwords. Nathaniel was careless with routine. He still used his mother's birthday for backups. Within hours, I had access to his cloud, messages, calendars, private notes. It was all there. But what I didn't expect, what made me pause, truly pause, was her identity. Clara Kingston, wife of Henry Kingston, Henry Nathaniel's oldest friend, his golf partner, his surgical assistant on high-profile procedures, the man who toasted us on our 5th anniversary, the man who once held my hair back while I vomited after food poisoning in Napa. He didn't just betray me. He betrayed a brother. I stared at the photos. I found Clara's smile in a sunlit room I didn't recognize. Nathaniel's shirt on her floor, notes between them that read like vows. My chest didn't ache the way I thought it would. I felt nothing. Not numbness, not pain, command. He had underestimated me, they both had. I was the woman who could read 6-figure risk indexes in one glance, who could predict currency collapse before the banks blinked. Did they think I wouldn't notice? I hired a private investigator the next day. Discreet, expensive, ex-military. He said nothing when I handed him the file labeled Clara, only nodded and promised a full report in 10 business days. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't need to. I wasn't operating from emotion anymore. I was building a case. Every woman reaches a point where she realizes the marriage she's in is not a partnership, but a performance. The moment I found that note, my role ended. I stepped off stage. I wasn't to prey anymore. I was the predator. I didn't text Henry. I showed up. His house was quieter than I remembered, the kind of silence that follows grief, not peace. He opened the door still in his scrubs, his face drawn, his eyes hollowed. For a second, we just stood there. No words, no small talk. just the heavy acknowledgement of the storm we were both drowning in. "I know," I said. He didn't ask what I knew. He didn't need to. We sat at his kitchen island like two trauma survivors. Not quite friends. Not quite strangers. Just two people tethered by betrayal, trying to breathe through the smoke. "She says everything I thought I wanted," Henry finally whispered, voice cracking. "And now I see she was just performance. For both of us." I nodded. "They think they in love, but love doesn't require shadows." He looked up at me, something steely hardening behind the sadness. "What are you going to do?" My lips curved not in cruelty, but in control. Nothing rash, nothing messy, just visible. I laid out the plan that night. An elegant charity dinner, a benefit for reconstructive surgery for burn victims. 'Cause driven, media-friendly, impeccably on brand, held. Of course, at the Quinn estate, Nathaniel loved playing philanthropist almost as much as he loved being admired for it. Clara would be there, always at his side lately. The guest list would include medical board members, foundation donors, and hospital directors. People whose opinions shaped reputations, careers, funding. And it would all happen under crystal chandeliers between speeches and champagne. A stage, perfectly set. Henry listened in silence, jaw tight. "You really think he'll show up with her?" "They won't be able to resist," I replied. "Two beautiful martyrs, fresh off a long separation narrative. They'll think it's the perfect debut." I didn't want to ruin him in a flash of fury. That would be too easy, too clean. No, I wanted Nathaniel to unravel in real time. I wanted him to stand in a room full of polished admiration and feel it sour with every lingering stare. Every whisper passed over shoulder, length curls and cuff-linked wrists. I wanted him to smile at someone only to see discomfort flicker in return. That subtle shift, when people realize you're no longer safe to be seen next to. I don't want him to suffer, I thought. I want him to remember. Every moment, every crumble of dignity. As his mask falls off piece by piece, it wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming reality, about showing the world and him who he really was, under all that practiced charm and curated perfection. Henry agreed to play his part. He de-escort me. Just for optics. He de-keep his mouth shut, his posture tall, and his expression unreadable until the final reveal. We had 2 weeks. In that time, I ordered the catering, selected the wines, coordinated the valet team. I rehearsed my speech, not the one for the podium, the one in my smile, in the tilt of my head, in the calm with which I greet them both. I make it impossible for them to frame me as bitter. I make it impossible for anyone to pity them. I make it unforgettable. Let the world see their romance. Let the room watch it die in real time. And I raise a glass and toast their perfect little future. The day before the dinner, the house was silent. Not empty intentional. Every room had been touched, polished, staged, fresh orchids in the foyer. Handwritten menus placed under each gold-rimmed charger. Crystal glasses aligned with surgical precision. But the real work was upstairs. In the study, I laid everything out like a prosecutor assembling a case file. Each photo labeled, each receipt time-stamped, each printed message highlighted and tabbed. I had bank transactions showing gifts to a boutique Clara frequented. I had screenshots of encrypted messages between her and Nathaniel. Sweet nothings that curdled into logistics meetups, cover stories, shared hotel confirmations. I had audio transcriptions from the private investigator, a recorded brunch, where they laughed about finally stepping into the light. And yet, I wasn't shaking. My hands didn't tremble, because this wasn't rage. This was craft. I'd always been good at assembling narratives, deconstructing threats, reading between lines. But this was personal. This was art. I wasn't aiming to ruin them. No. That would imply emotion. What I wanted was control, clarity, precision. I stood in front of the mirror that afternoon, hair pinned back, pearl earrings on. My reflection looked untouched, composed, maybe even serene. Then I practiced. Out loud. Good evening. Thank you for coming, pause. As some of you know, I've been proud to co-host this event with my husband for the last 8 years. Pause, smile. But this year, I am especially proud to speak not just as a sponsor, but as a woman reclaiming truth. My voice didn't quiver. Not once. I rehearsed the speech again, but this time imagining their faces. Nathaniel, 2 seats down. His smile stiffening. Clara, blinking faster than usual. Henry, jaw locked but still. And the guests polished, poised, watching the golden couple lose their balance in real time. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't accuse. That was the point. I would reveal. Not all at once. Not like a bomb. Like a symphony, one measured note after another, building tension until the room itself became part of the verdict. That night, I reviewed the seating chart once more. Nathaniel and Clara would be seated exactly where I needed them. Visible but cornered, framed by board members and media patrons. There would be no graceful exits. As the sun set, I stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the garden where the dinner would be held. The caterers had finished their final walk. Through, the lanterns were strung. The silver was polished. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a reckoning, and I wasn't the wronged wife anymore. I was the curator of truth, the conductor of collapse. Tomorrow, the mask would fall. But tonight, I slept like I hadn't tea in months, steady, silent, and certain. The estate shimmered under soft gold lighting, every stone path lined with lanterns, every hydrangea trimmed to perfection. The Quinn name had never looked more graceful, more timeless. And neither had I. I wore deep burgundy, a shade that whispered strength and bled elegance. The dress clung with intent, structured like armor, sculpted like truth. My hair was pinned low, not a strand out of place. The earrings were antique, a nod to legacy, to everything I intended to protect, and everything I was about to let go. Guests arrived in waves of perfume and polite laughter. Hands were kissed, cheeks brushed. No one suspected the fault line running beneath the marble floor. No one saw the match in my palm. Nathaniel arrived late, as always smiling, confident, savoring his entrance, until his gaze landed on the table, table 7. Henry stood behind the chair I had assigned him, guiding Clara into her seat with the grace of a gentleman who had not slept in days. She wore champagne silk, low-cut and rehearsed, but her smile twitched when she saw me across the garden, and Nathaniel, he froze. Just a fraction. Just long enough for me to notice the brief paralysis of a man caught mid-performance. He moved quickly, too quickly toward the table, offering Henry a handshake with just enough tension in his jaw to crack bone. Clara looked anywhere but at me. Perfect. Dinner began. Wine flowed. Laughter softened the air. But beneath it all was a hum, a low, electric static. Every guest at table 7 could feel it. The polite conversation never quite took flight. Eyes flicked between Nathaniel and Clara, wondering, sensing something off. I waited, course after course, toast after toast, and then I stood. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice fluid and warm before dessert is served. I'd like to offer a brief word. All heads turned. Nathaniel leaned back slightly, glass in hand. Clara shifted. Henry went still. "I want to thank you not just for your generosity tonight, but for your presence." I scanned the room. Smiles, nods, trust. For years, this home has hosted evenings like this. Beautiful evenings. And Ivy always taken pride in making them seamless. I paused. But this year is different. The silence settled heavy. Forks stopped. Glasses lowered. This year, I've learned that appearances, while lovely, are often built on cracks we train ourselves not to see. I didn't look at Nathaniel. I didn't need to. Sometimes, those cracks grow quietly beneath the surface, until one day, the entire foundation trembles. A shift, a whisper, a breath caught. And when that day comes, I continued. You have two choices. Patch the lie or honor the truth. I reached for the small envelope placed in front of me, embossed with the same crest as the menu cards. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. In that spirit, I'd like to dedicate tonight, not just to healing others, but to healing ourselves, to those brave enough to face what's broken, to the strength it takes not to hold something together, but to let it fall with grace. I raised my glass, to honesty, to clarity, and to no longer pretending. The guests clapped, some hesitant, some confused, some knowingly. Nathaniel sat frozen. Clara's hand had fallen from his knee. Henry? He didn't blink. And me. I smiled, sipped my wine, and took my seat as the cracks beneath the table finally opened. I waited until the laughter faded, until wine glasses were low and forks idle, until everyone, even Nathaniel, had begun to believe the worst was over. Then I stood again, glass in hand. Before dessert is served, I said smoothly, I'd like to offer something a little less sweet. A ripple moved through the room. Soft laughter, nervous and unsure. I didn't smile. I placed my glass down with care. This evening, I've spoken about truth, about the beauty of letting go. But now, I'd like to show you what truth actually looks like. I reached beneath the table and lifted a cream-colored folder, thick, matte, unassuming. I opened it slowly, carefully. Inside, curated artifacts. Not rage, not speculation. Evidence with the poise of a trial lawyer. I placed the first photo at the center of the long oak table, Clara, in Nathaniel's arms. Taken on the balcony of a private resort in Asheville. Her head on his shoulder, his hand at her waist. The guests nearest table 7 leaned in. The rest went silent. A beat later, I laid down the second item. A printed receipt for a $14,000 diamond bracelet. Bought 3 weeks before our anniversary. Shipped to a Charleston Poe box recipient. Clara Kingston. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look for reactions. I let the evidence speak. Then I pulled out my phone, tapped once. A recording began loud enough for the center tables to hear. Loud enough for the silence to amplify it. Only 2 more months, Nathaniel's voice said. Low, intimate. And we wouldn't have to hide anymore. Clara's voice followed. Breathless and eager. Do you really think she suspects? And then his laugh, casual, confident. Cruel, Amelia sees what I show her. Nothing more. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It roared. Henry's hand shook against his wine glass. Clara pale, exposed, choked on her breath. Tears welled instantly, too fast to hide. And Nathaniel, ashen. Still, his eyes locked on the photos like they might combust if he stared long enough. I turned toward him slowly, and then, without fury, without haste, I leaned in. Close enough that only he could hear. How does it feel to be stripped bare right where you once preached about ethics? He blinked once, just once. Then his mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no words followed. The entire room held its breath. Someone gasped. Somewhere, a fork fell, and then unmistakably the subtle click of a phone camera. Then another. A guest near the end of the table lifted her phone, recording in silent shock. I stood up straight. My heart didn't race. My hands were steady. This wasn't chaos. This was clarity. Across the room, donors whispered. Board members stared. And Nathaniel, he wasn't a man anymore. He was a cautionary tale unraveling in real time. I turned to the stunned guests and offered one final line. The truth, like dessert, is best served without apology. Then I walked away past his shame, past her tears, past the wreckage of the lie they built, and into my own story. Finally, mine. It didn't take long. 3 days after the Eden dinner, the hospital board announced Nathaniel's suspension pending a full investigation. Misuse of funds, travel reimbursements tied to fabricated medical conferences, hotel charges billed under outreach retreats. All traceable, all damning. He used hospital resources to finance an affair with the wife of his closest colleague. There were whispers of license review, of quiet settlements. But Eden Hill was a town that fed on reputation, and Nathaniel's had rotted beneath the gold leaf. He tried to spin it, of course. It was a misunderstanding, he told the press. A personal matter, unfairly politicized. But the audio recordings had already circulated. The photos, too. I didn't leak them, I didn't have to. Truth. Once cracked open, spreads like wildfire. Clara's world collapsed in synchronized rhythm. Her brand sponsorships, the skincare deals, the lifestyle podcasts, the philanthropic ambassadorships, vanished within a week. One by one, smiling press releases turned to no further comment. Henry filed for divorce. No theatrics. Just a single motion. I heard he served her the papers at her sister S. Lake House, with not so much as a raised voice. He stayed quiet through the storm. But in the end, his silence cut deeper than screams ever could. As for me, I left. Eden Hill had always been a stage, and I was done performing. I sold the estate, packed what mattered, burned what didn't, and headed east to a saltwater town with chipped sidewalks and sea glass mornings. I rented a cottage with weathered shutters and a crooked porch swing. The air smelled like driftwood and tide. It was nothing like Eden Hill, and that was exactly the point. And then, I built something. A consultancy. Small at first, quiet. Word of mouth. Referrals from attorneys, therapists, women who needed more than suspicion. Women who needed clarity. I named it the glass table. Because that what Eden Hill had taught me. People hide their darkest truths in plain sight beneath polish. Behind laughter, inside picture, perfect homes. And I built a life exposing them. The glass table didn't promise revenge. It promised light, records, evidence, closure. One woman at a time. The logo was simple, a cracked but shining table, with light pouring through. A reporter once asked me, months later, during a feature in a local coastal magazine, why that name? I smiled honestly this time and said, because here, everything's transparent. And it was. There were no masks left to wear. No dinners left to host. No truths left to bury. Only the quiet power of starting again, not as someone's wife, not as someone's prize, but as the woman who shattered the illusion and then built something luminous from the shards. The tide was low that afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the gauzy curtains of my cottage, tracing golden lines across the hardwood floor. Outside, the ocean breathed steady, unhurried. The wind carried salt and soft gull cries. Peace no longer felt like a stranger. It felt like a room I had finally earned the key to. I sat by the window, barefoot, a wool cardigan draped over my shoulders. My laptop was open on the side table, half filled with PDFs and timelines, the markings of another case. Another woman, another marriage polished on the outside and rotting quietly beneath. Her name was Celeste. She was 42, mother of 2, married to a pillar of the community. Her voice had trembled in her intake call, but beneath it, I heard the same sound I'd once buried in myself, the low, pulsing signal of intuition refusing to be silenced. She was the reason I worked weekends now. Not for money, for meaning. I reviewed the receipts she uploaded. Strange rental charges, gaps in travel itineraries, unfamiliar subscriptions. I was halfway through Cross, referencing hotel locations, when a new email notification slid into view. Subject: Hi, from Henry Kingston. I stared at it for a long moment. The surf whispering in the distance like a heartbeat I no longer feared. The message was brief. I hope you well. I saw something that reminded me of that dinner, and weirdly, I laughed for the first time in weeks. If you ever in town for coffee, I am around. No pressure. Just thought I'd say hi. There was no attachment. No plea. No undertone. Just a soft knock on a door I hadn't realized was still unlocked. I didn't reply. Not yet. I closed the laptop, took a long breath. Let the silence fill the room like a warm tide. I wasn't the woman who begged for clarity anymore. I was the one who gave it. I stood, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water from the old ceramic pitcher. My reflection in the window wasn't tea flawless, but it was mine. Freckled, smiling slightly. Alive. I used to be a background character in my own life, I whispered. And it was true. I had once narrated a story where everyone else had the spotlight, where I played the perfect host, the supportive wife, the silent observer to my own unraveling. But not anymore. Now, I am writing the script. And it wouldn't be a tragedy. It would be sharp. Slow. Brilliant. A story where women find their voice at the edge of betrayal and learn to wield it like a blade. I took one last look at the waves, then turned back toward the case file waiting on my desk, and I can promise this: no one lies to me twice.